The Empire Strikes Back is the sequel to 1977's Star Wars. It became one of the most famous sequels and really one of the most famous movies. One of the main things it's remembered for, other than incredible characters, unforgettable quotes, and engaging narrative or thrilling effects, is how dark it is compared to the original. These days, it's a common turn of phrase to refer to a darker sequel, typically a blockbuster or tentpole film, as the Empire Strikes Back of its franchise. Temple of Doom is the Empire Strikes Back of Indiana Jones. The Dark Knight is the Empire Strikes Back of that trilogy. The Lost World is the Empire Strikes Back to Jurassic Park, and Fallen Kingdom is already being referred to as looking like the Empire Strikes Back of Jurassic World. Well, Spider-Man 2 is one of my favorite sequels ever made, but it's definitely not the Empire Strikes Back of Spider-Man. This tendency to go darker with the sequel is an intriguing one, and it's honestly one that I understand. Once you establish the characters in the first movie, thrusting them into a darker story and seeing how they react is an interesting idea. But I don't think that it always has to be this way. Ever since the success of The Empire Strikes Back, it seems that this is more or less the default state of mind when approaching a sequel. How can we take this idea, these characters, and turn them on their heads in a darker way than the first? But there's also another trend with sequels. In honor of one of my favorite bands, I like to call it... This is when, instead of taking the characters into a dark and new story, they do exactly the same thing as the first movie, except this time, it's not the first time. The characters are put through extremely similar situations as the first film, and they often have to backtrack to fulfill the same kind of arc they had in the first movie. I see this one probably even more than the Empire Strikes Back method, and there are some good sequels that follow this mentality, but it doesn't change the fact that the same events are basically just happening again with minor alterations here and there. With Spider-Man 2, Sam Raimi and company carefully avoided each of those sequel traps. Spider-Man 2 doesn't come across as a darker version of the first movie. It's a bit more mature and humanizes the characters in a way that the first film didn't. But it retains the style, atmosphere, and sensibilities of the first movie while it does this. Some sequels feel like a grittier, entirely separate entity from the previous film. There's nothing inherently wrong with that, but Spider-Man 2 feels like a new chapter in the same book. And instead of feeling like nothing more than a Spider-Man 1 retread, the movie offers a perfect evolution from the first film. Mary Jane was struggling to book an acting gig, now she has one but can't get Peter there to see it. Harry vows vengeance on Spider-Man, now he's actively seeking it out, and finds the hard truth in the process. Peter became Spider-Man, now he has to be Spider-Man, and he ends up failing to live up to that name for quite a bit of the movie. The sequel takes themes, ideas, and thoughts from the first movie, and adds a layer of depth and humanity to them. This is perfectly embodied in my favorite scene of the movie, when Peter tells Aunt May the truth about what happened to Uncle Ben. It's a heartbreaking scene where Peter puts the whole story on the table for the first time, and it's so overwhelming that it causes even Aunt May to pull back and walk away. This scene is literally taking something that happened in the first movie and bringing it to a whole new place of emotion and impact. It takes what's been established and pulls a different, gut-wrenching reaction out of the audience. This can also be seen in the burning building scene. Spider-Man 1 and 2 both feature a scene where Peter has to rescue someone from a burning building, but the sequences end up two radically different ways. In the first movie, Spider-Man saves the kid just in time and returns to the building to have an awesome fight with Green Goblin. In the second movie, having given up the role of Spider-Man, Peter rushes into a burning building to save a child. He struggles his way through the house, almost falls to his probable death, and barely makes it out alive with the kid, only to discover minutes later that a person was left on the 4th floor and died in the building. This is a shock for Peter and a realization that a person died because of his decision to give up Spider-Man. But at the same time, Spider-Man 2 shares some of the crazy, cheesy comic book sensibilities of the first movie. Just like the first film, it features huge, fun set pieces, a ridiculously awesome villain, and some great cheesy dialogue and one-liners. This consistency and tone, while still retaining its own identity, is the glue that holds the two movies together, and a factor that leads to it standing out amongst some of the needlessly dark sequels. Spider-Man 2 presents new meaning and context under the same light, while a lot of sequels present the same meaning and context, but under a new light. That's why Spider-Man 1 and 2 make such a compelling pair. I can never watch one of them without watching the other next. Spider-Man 3 is a topic for another week, but these first two movies go hand in hand. As I've said before, there's nothing wrong with taking a sequel in a dark direction if it's the right thing for the story and for the characters. But Raimi and his team managed to make a sequel that takes its characters to new emotional highs and lows, maintains the tones and rhythms of the first movie, while using that first movie as a base to build incredibly moving payoffs to. And yeah, it also gives us one of the best superhero movies ever made. And if you ask me, that's how you make a sequel. How's it going? Thanks for watching that video. If you liked the video, share it with anybody that you think would like it as well. Subscribe to see a video like it every Tuesday. You can like us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. You can follow me on all those at Daniel C. Rickman. And if you'll excuse me, it's 3:45 in the morning and I'm gonna go to bed.